I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. My guest today is Wayne Haber. Wayne is Director of Engineering at GitLab, focusing on security, AI, and growth. He has over 20 years experience in leading teams in security and engineering, and he self-admittedly says he spends too much time reading as he finishes approximately one book a week. My wife would say there's no such thing as too much time reading, and I'm kind of right there with her. I think that's fantastic. So welcome, Wayne.
Well, hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So because you have a voracious appetite for reading right out of the gate, I want to ask, what's the most recent book you've read? And what's the book that you find yourself recommending to folks the most?
So actually, just in the middle of the night last night, I couldn't sleep, and I finished reading on my Kindle Stephen King's book on writing, which was really interesting as he talked about not only how to write a good story, and he gets very, very specific about that, but also in general and about a little bit of an autobiography too. I highlighted a couple things in there. One is he listens to the critics of his books, but he doesn't take them seriously unless they agree. And it's like if many of the critics agree, he's probably done something he can improve on. I thought that was really insightful from Stephen King. In terms of books I recommend, lots of great books out there. Some, an oldie but a goodie, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
It still applies today, especially as a leader. Another is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah, great.
It is really, really valuable and is a great read because it teaches you, first starting basically with a fable, and then talks about the details behind it and the interactions. But those are two that I tell people to start with.
I think that's still my favorite of Patrick's books. That's a terrific book. So thanks. I haven't read Stephen King's book on writing yet, but I imagine just understanding his process of how do you create something, I think there's probably a lot there that I would enjoy. And also I can buy that for my wife because she's a huge Stephen King fan anyway. So let me ask you about leading teams, because you have all this experience and expertise of leading teams. And a lot of the teams that, from our last conversation, most of the teams, if not all of the teams that you have led, are globally dispersed teams, people working remotely. So I think you've got some great lessons to share with us about how do you do that? Because there are a lot of folks who are listening who probably they're new to leading folks who are working in a hybrid setting. They're at home, or they are new to an organization where they've got a globally dispersed team. And you could probably take some years off their journey with your expertise and experience. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I work for GitLab, which is a DevSecOps company providing development, security, and operations tools to people around the world, customers around the world. And we're globally distributed, I think in the order of magnitude of 1,500 to 2,000 team members or employees spread around the world. And like my team of 80, I think my team of 80 is in 16 time zones. So we don't geographically locate teams. So I have one team of 8 people. They're in 7 different time zones, with some with no business hours overlap. That's very common at the company. And there's no office, period. There's a PO box somewhere, I think in San Francisco, but there's no official office for the company. And the way we make this work, well, some of the benefits of this are that we can hire people, we don't hire in every country, but we hire in many countries. So we hire the people who have the best skills wherever they happen to be, the best skills fit, and the best culture fit as well. But then how do we make it work where there's no time zone overlap between some team members? How do you keep people on the same pages? It's not one thing, it's a number of things that add up to success on that. So the first is we document everything in writing, whether it's publicly in the GitLab handbook, which is primarily public on how we operate as a company, to meetings. When we do have meetings, we document what's going to be discussed in the meeting beforehand, take really good notes during the meeting, take notes after the meeting, record the meetings, and then distribute those so that people who couldn't make it for whatever reason, maybe they have to take care of a sick child or it's not during their working hours or whatever, they can participate. And if they put a comment in before the meeting, we'll read it out loud. We don't review documents or slides in meetings almost ever, maybe 1% of the time. You're expected to read the slides or watch the video or both before the meeting and bring your commentary and questions to the meeting that you may have. So this allows people to really interact very well and make sure everybody is heard during the meeting, but anybody who couldn't make it before or can participate. And also people can read the notes and watch the recordings after to get the body language and the tone in addition to reading the notes.
Yeah. Wow. So that's vastly different from many organizations. And I love the strategic intention behind how you design those conversations, right? Meetings as conversations. Just the simple thing of being intentional to place the reason for the meeting in the invite. You wouldn't be surprised. You probably know how many companies, how many people don't do that. So people see things in their calendar and they go, I have no idea what this meeting is for.
Yeah, that's really good. We cancel meetings without an agenda.
I love that. Say that
Period.
again louder.
We
That is awesome.
cancel meetings without an agenda.
I love that. I love
And
that.
we also have in our culture that all meetings are optional. So even if you can make it, even if you're interested, you don't have to come. You can watch the notes afterwards, participate asynchronously, as we call it. The other is you have to make sure, not just in meetings, but where meetings are secondary for our communication. We try to keep everything in writing using the GitLab product itself in things we call issues or epics, very engineering specific things, or when that doesn't work as well, for whatever reason, Google Docs, et cetera, is we try to communicate that way first. And a meeting is a last resort. We want to try to do, and sometimes you still need it. And we also use Slack to get people's attention
Yeah.
when we need to, but we try to keep that to a minimum. We don't succeed. It's not at a minimum, but it's much smaller than any other company I've worked at. And in those written communications, you have to assume others have low context. What I mean by that is, let's say like one of my direct reports is in Australia and we have 0 time zone overlap. When I finish my day is when she's barely getting up for the day. And we'll sometimes miscommunicate because she'll tell me something and she'll use a term I haven't heard before or a term that might be interpretable in multiple ways, and I won't know what she's talking about. Or vice versa. I do the same to her. So if you assume that people need that additional context on the why, that's one of my other favorite books is Start With Why
Yes.
by Sinek.
Yeah.
But starting with why, but also assuming people don't know the context and giving it to them. It takes a little more time to document that and to write that up and repeat that, but it helps with efficiency and understanding. And I think that's really key as well.
So it sounds like there's more. So my friend David Isaacs, who was one of the co-founders of the World Cafe process, said that a primary role of leaders is to design, convene, and host conversations that matter. And it sounds like at GitLab, the way that you are designing, convening, and hosting meetings, conversations, that you can say that meetings are optional because if there's a meeting, oh no, this is important enough that it has become a meeting. And even if it's optional, I'm going to be there.
Yes. And the other interesting thing is I have a shadow program where people can, inside the company, outside the company can shadow me. And it's interesting to get that outsider's perspective. And one of the things I learned last week is you have meetings where anybody can talk no matter what their level in the company. I'm like, yes, I didn't even think about that other companies don't do that. Although I've been in companies like that in the past. So
Yeah.
anybody can comment, whether it's the CEO having a strong opinion about something or a new employee who's at the, early in their career. Everybody has an opportunity to contribute. And there isn't shame in asking, we try to give people psychological safety. There's no shame in asking a question that they feel maybe they should already know the answer to. The other is, I've heard from my shadows. I learned this when I started the company years ago, but I forgot. It's shocking sometimes. We start meetings on time. The second that clock turns 00 or 30 after the hour, we start. People can join when they can, and we also stop on time or early. We have meetings, 30-minute meetings are actually scheduled for 25.
Right.
Hour-long meetings are scheduled for 50 minutes. When we're at end of agenda, we stop because we don't want meetings or discussions to expand into the time allotted. They should be the amount of time they need and no more. And we also don't back up in the agenda. If somebody comes late, they catch up as best they can.
Yeah.
We never back up in the agenda. So it keeps things really efficient. And initially, it's kind of shocking. Like, oh my, I apologize when I join a meeting 1 minute late, which is crazy. But it's the company culture that we want to keep really efficient. And whenever anybody apologizes, it's like, it's okay. Remember, all meetings are optional, etc. But for my shadows, at least, they brought that up. Like, that's somewhat shocking to them.
Yeah, it's unusual, but it's a fabulous set of beliefs and behaviors in terms of a culture, a globally dispersed culture, right? But no, this is how we show up. This is how we communicate with one another and work together. So I'm curious, when you get to meetings, are they decision-making meetings? So that's part one. So when you do get to a meeting, what's the point of it? It's not just sharing information, I'm assuming. How do people collaborate on work?
Meetings are almost never about sharing information. Well, not all, maybe 10% of the time. It's discussing a decision that's made, getting feedback to make a decision before making the decision, and all the discussion that happens in advance. So we use Slack, we use our own GitLab product, which has in issues, and Epics has threaded conversations. So we try to start there of using the product itself to have those discussions about decisions, whether it's an engineering thing or a product management thing in developing the product, or a changed HR policy, or something that legal is analyzing for risk. The whole company uses it. And that really helps that everybody has a voice, and we get a lot of collaboration. Often those things are also public. So not only can our employees comment on it, our customers can, our users can, the general public can. And that works really, really well, as I've seen it, like 98% of the time, roughly. 2% of the time, it goes off track where there's too many opinions from too many people to keep track of it all. And that's why we also have a concept of a DRI, or directly responsible individual, that we decided one person is going to be responsible for listening to everybody's opinion, responding to it, and then making the decision. And then we have the concept of that we didn't invent, but disagree, commit, disagree. We disagree as we
Right.
discuss, we commit to the decision, which means we're doing it. Feel free to disagree still afterwards, to comment on it, but you can't miss the middle part. You still need to commit. That really helps us make decisions and be efficient.
And that's really critical too. It sounds like you've figured out a way to be really clear on how are we making decisions, who owns decisions, and then what happens once what's made. So it eliminates a ton of potential conflict because of confusion of, oh, I thought that was my decision. Oh, I thought that was our decision. Right. So cleans that up a lot.
It does. It's when we have to make decisions quickly, which thankfully is not that often, because we're not perfect at planning, but we plan things out. It's a challenge when you need to get feedback and people are spread across the world. Sometimes you have to make a decision quicker than you can wait for feedback, but thankfully that's the rare exception. We try to wait to make sure we get feedback from everybody we want to, but sometimes we can't. And people
Yeah.
generally understand that and appreciate that. Occasionally, it does create some stress, but that's the exception, not the rule.
So I'm wondering, are there any unique challenges in your kind of organization, globally dispersed, when you're leading a transformation of communicating it and then checking in with everybody on how they are understanding, accepting, adopting, and helping with the transformation?
I'm in the midst of that right now, with some changes to priorities for various of my teams and some of my peers' teams, and in coordination with our product managers, who decide what to build in the product and what the priorities are. And it's key about explaining the why, the what and the why, the when. Like, we're changing X priority to Y. Here's the business impact. Here's when we're going to do it. Give us feedback. And then we don't tend to need to make those changes, the next day. It's usually in the next couple of days. So then what we'll do is things like that is make sure the people who are impacted have a chance hear the news from their manager and have an opportunity to discuss it with their manager. And then once everybody who's impacted by a change like that is informed, then we make it public inside the company, and sometimes public to look. And then anybody else who's interested can hear about it and understand the why on the change. But it's still the DRI, the directly responsible individual, that makes the decision. For example, in that case, there's two major stakeholders. There's engineering and product management. There's usually a DRI for product management, a DRI for engineering. Sometimes that's me, sometimes not. But then they decide and communicate. And you can't make perfect decisions that make everybody happy about every aspect. So sometimes you have to make decisions that take all the best qualities and document the risks.
So, with all of that, younger leaders shadowing you on a regular basis. And so, when you have an opportunity to share advice from you based on your years of experience and your expertise, what's the advice that you give to younger leaders most?
That's a great question. What I'd say is, say leaders in general, GitLab has a unique culture. It's not perfect. It's pretty good. That's why been at the company for years. But don't assume that works here will work wherever you are. You have to work within the culture of the company where you are at. Well, no matter what the age range of the leader is. Others, it's I don't think I really change my advice based on the level of experience of the leader. I'm thinking about because I've had shadows that are younger and same age as me and older, and yeah, I think one on the younger is where they have less experience is think about something that's stressing when there's something that you're being stressed by it. Think about how you may think about that in a year. Is it going to be that big of a deal in a year? And ask for feedback from others who may have gone through something similar. These can be big things. Like I was mentoring someone for about 6 months, talking to them once every 2 weeks where his company was acquired by a much larger company. And he was really stressed about, is his team going to be reorganized? The acquiring company's values match the company's values of the that he works for, that's being acquired, et cetera. Like, I've been a part of both of these. I've been acquired multiple times and also done the acquiring. This too shall pass. Give it time. Don't stay at a company where there isn't a fit, but give it 6 months to figure it out if you're happy with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that with those with less experience, that's the kind of advice I tend to give.
So, I mean, there's a lot there, so much wisdom. So I'm going to feed it back to you because just so that I grok it, right? So show up with curiosity to begin with, right? So the way you did your last role in maybe your last company might not work here. So curiosity invites you to maybe be adaptable and flexible in what kind of a style, beliefs, and behaviors you deploy as a leader. The capacity to zoom in and out, right? So something's happening, it's immediate, and you go, oh my God, right? So that stepping back or looking out a year, imagine it's a year out, right? And will this still be something that you think the world is on fire? So that ability to zoom out and get some perspective, that's a great skill for a leader to have, because so much comes at you that you think that, oh, I got to do this right away. Oh, this is a big deal. And that's not really a big deal, right? So that capacity to have perspective. And then the piece that you mentioned too is getting feedback on a regular basis, having somebody that you trust around who, I always say to the leaders that I coach, you need somebody in the organization who you give them full permission to tell you when you have spinach in your teeth, right? That they're going to tell you when you're doing something that, oh man, stop doing that.
Yeah, and being open to that feedback is really key. It's easy to
Yeah.
become defensive. I always thank people for feedback. If they give you feedback, it's because they care. So, for example, I'm not sure exactly why. Lately, I've had a tendency to ramble and justify my decisions, which I'm trying to provide the why and the context. But I got feedback from my manager like last week. Hey, Wayne, we trust you. You don't need to justify so much. You can do that afterwards. So I really appreciated that feedback from him because you know what, you're right. I'm rambling a bit. So I appreciate that feedback. And I don't always agree with everybody's feedback, of course, but I really appreciated that.
Yeah, because if somebody's giving me feedback, they're putting themselves in a position where it's uncomfortable for them, because we don't, you might not like me, might get mad at me. And so if they are, you just said it, if they're giving me feedback, it's a gift.
Feedback is a gift.
If they don't care
Absolutely.
about me, they're not going to give me feedback.
Yeah. So on the other side, one thing I give advice to, because sometimes I talk to people that have more experience rather than less when mentoring, is don't let your skills atrophy, and don't let your skills be too pigeonholed, if that's the correct term, too specialized, where it may have been great many years ago, but it's not as popular anymore. And as you said, be curious, learn new things. Like, example, I taught myself Flutter software development about a year ago. I just picked up a LinkedIn learning class because I wanted to write a mobile app. And I hadn't written code to that level in years, but I just wanted to learn it because I wanted to write a mobile app. And my goal was, I'm going to get a mobile app in the Apple App Store. And one person is going to download it and like it. And lo and behold, two people have liked it. I don't know how many have downloaded it. It's been out there a year. I haven't looked recently, probably three like it since then. It's just a little specialized app. So it let me feel comfortable. Hey, I can still do these things. And I'm not stuck in my career where I am. I can do other things and learn new things. I think that's really key as well, to not get too complacent.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning and leadership go hand in hand. Wayne, this has been awesome. I love to finish all the meetings that I host and my coaching conversations with an expression of gratitude. So I'm very grateful for you being here today. But I would like, is there anything you're grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? Grateful to have a nice, a great work-life balance, so I can focus on work when I need to and focus on things outside of work when I need to. And I'm both grateful and stressed out by the number of different video streaming services that exist that have great content, such as I can't keep up with Mandalorian and The Crown and all the other great things that, great content out there.
There's too much stuff to watch and not enough hours in the day.
Indeed.
I hear you, brother. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. Fantastic. I'm going to tell you right now that your experience on leading globally dispersed teams and the process that you have, there's a book there, my friend. Go write it.
I've thought about that. Thank you. The parting comment I'll make is GitLab is a bit unique, and we put together this thing called Team Ops. If you Google Team Ops, which it points to free training that we host on how GitLab operates. And there's a little online class that people can take. Again, all free, and it talks about the GitLab culture and how we operate, and covers many of the things I discussed. So I'd encourage your listeners to check that out if they're interested.
I am going to check that out as soon as we're done. Wayne, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of Ultra Leadership, and we will see you next time. If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.